our guest today, Sister Amina Khan. And just before the break, Sister Amina, you had got up to the point where those around you within the church had realised that you were thinking about becoming a nun. Mm-hmm. How old were you at this point?
I just turned 16.
Right.
Yeah.
So literally a year or so into joining, after joining the church.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned how the priest helped you get some numbers, and presumably you applied at that stage or later on?
The thing was, he gave me 2 addresses to get in contact with. One was an active order that specialised in nursing the elderly and the sick, and also running a guest house, hospitality. And the other address was of a contemplative order. One that meant that they wouldn't go outside for, say for instance, to do teaching or social work or nursing, and their life was a life of prayer only.
Oh, prayer only, okay.
So the one I got in contact with first was the active order, because I thought, okay, you get the best of both worlds. So the first thing I did was write a letter asking if I could come on a retreat, and so I did do that later on in the summer. But it was 1 week retreat and then 1 week to work in the guest house. So I'd get a taste. I didn't actually write to the contemplative order because, I don't know, I thought, okay, that one will be enough, and I'm not sure about contemplative order.
Sure.
But it was the priest who had said, I went to that contemplative order the other day and they said you haven't written to them. I was like, okay, fine, I'll write to them. So, and I asked if it would be possible to stay with them for 3 days in their guest house. So, and that was arranged. Okay. And that would be over the summer as well.
Okay, so presumably that summer you did both?
Yeah.
Okay, and what was the conclusion you came to after experiencing both?
Okay, the active order, I came to the conclusion that if you can juggle both lives of religious service to God and doing nursing, that's good, but I thought I couldn't do that because it would be like splitting myself into 2.
Really?
Yeah. And the contemplative order, now that was different, and I felt it was more inviting and more warm, even though at that point I'd meet the sisters behind what was called a grill in the parlour, which was like meeting them behind a gate. Why was that? Well, it's to do with the rule of enclosure and how it's interpreted.
Okay.
So we'd be in a room, but it would be partitioned by a small wall and these gates, and part of the gate would open. And on my side it would be carpeted and comfy chairs, warm, nice, curtains. And then on their side it was bare wooden boards, white wall, crucifix, a hard chair, and that was that. But actually that appealed more to me. And also that the time I spent with them, I was also allowed in the garden. And the gardens were huge, and they were nice, and so that's how I got to see sort of a bit more. And I met different sisters each day while I was there.
The 3 days you were there. So you then decided that you were going to join the contemplative order?
No, I thought my calling was sort of heading towards being contemplative, to be enclosed. But it wasn't for another few years before I could actually join them.
Because?
Because of my age. I was 16, you have to be over 18.
Right.
And also I looked into different contemplative orders during that time. And also another monastic house, which was of the same order as the same ones I'd stayed with.
So you joined one of the orders at the age of 18?
No, I was at college doing my A-levels.
Okay.
And and then I'd finished college and I went to on like a pilgrimage to Assisi and Rome, and I'd sort of been not put off the idea of being a religious, being a nun, but I didn't think it was right for me. When I sort of began the pilgrimage, but when I came back, I thought, and I had the choice of going back to college. So I went back to college on the Monday morning, and halfway through the morning I just sort of decided, right, I'm going to ask to enter. So I walked out of college, wrote a letter, and I said, there are a few things I said in it, and I said the last thing, and another thing is I'd like to ask formally for permission to enter the religious order. So I sent the letter, and I was going in a few weeks because they were having a profession of one of the sisters, which meant she'd finished all her training and novitiate, and she was being professed as a nun properly. So she'd swap a white veil for a black veil, and she was in there then for life.
Really?
Yeah, so that was when we decided, okay, come and see us properly then. During that time frame, from when I was 16 to when I was 19, I'd sort of had I'd been in for a month at a time with the sisters, and sort of been on open days, and been with them for like some weeks during my half term and that. So I got to know them, and they got to know me quite well.
Okay. So, how long were you in this particular order for once you decided to join at the age of about 19?
Yeah, I was in the order itself for about 4 years.
Really?
Yeah.
And how long does it take for you to swap, or for one to swap a white veil for a black veil? In other words, did you manage to get through the whole process of, if you like, the graduation process, or was this something that would have taken a lot longer than 4 years?
It would have taken a minimum of 4.5 years. So
Really?
I was near the time.
So you were quite close to the end,
yeah,
of your tenure.
Yeah.
And then you decided that, did you decide to leave yourself?
Yes, I did.
Why?
Well, during my monastic life, my life as a nun, it wasn't just sort of a life of prayer. You know, you get up in the morning, you pray all day, all afternoon, all evening, go to bed, and that's it. We had other jobs to do. And one of the jobs I was printing, I had novitiate for my training, but the other thing that I was encouraged...
novitiate, sorry, if you could just...
Novitiate was like training. So one of the sisters would be your novice mistress, and she would sort of teach you the rules of the order, and about the order's saints. Our order's saints were Carmelites, so Saint Teresa of Avila and things like that. But that was the novitiate training. But I was also encouraged to do studying.
Okay.
So things like early scripture, Jewish and Christian scriptures.
Okay.
A lot of Bible study, early church history. And it was doing this studying and also learning Arabic from one of the other sisters.
Learning Arabic?
Yeah, she'd had 3 years in Cairo, Carmel.
So this is presumably a Catholic order in Egypt.
Yeah,
okay.
It was. It's now in Al Fayoum. They moved, but at the time they were in Cairo, a Catholic order in Cairo, and they were quite an international community. And one of the sisters at the monastery that I was in, she had gone to Cairo to help out. And she'd learnt Arabic from one of the Lebanese sisters and from the Egyptian gardeners, you know. So then I found out about this, and I've always been into language learning, and so I was like, teach me some, and she was like, okay, fine. So she taught me some, and then we went together to sort of like learn more about Arabic. And
you went together, what,
well,
outside of...
No, we sort of, that's a bit wrong. We sort of encouraged each other to sort of continue learning Arabic. So it meant sort of getting books from the library, or there was one where we got a New Testament, a children's New Testament in Arabic.
Okay.
So we'd sort of painstakingly try and learn the Arabic and read the Arabic.
Mm.
Yeah.
Was there a copy of the Quran in English or Arabic in the library?
That was one of the things that sort of guided me to Islam. With the studying, my questions came back, but this time I could sort of base my questions on certain facts that I'd found and certain holes that I'd found within Christian and Jewish traditions. And also learning Arabic, there was one I'd learned when I was first learning Arabic. I'd learn a phrase a day. So one thing was like, tomorrow there will be apricots, bukra fi mishmish. Then we'd sort of try and sort of get the grammar from it. Then another phrase that my course sister told me was La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. So it was interesting, the grammar, and I knew what it meant. And I was just sort of telling the novice mistress, who also happened to be the prioress, you know, oh, this is what, and she just asked, what did you learn for Arabic today? And I said, oh, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And she went, what does that mean? And I said, there is only one God and Muhammad is his prophet. And she said, and she hit the roof.
Really? I can imagine.
And she's like, what are you being taught these things for? You should be, you know, learning about your religion, your church, your history, about the Carmelite order. And I said, we just did it for the grammar. And I was sort of like, I don't care, you're not doing Arabic again. I said, okay, that's up to you, mother, but I'll do Arabic secretly if you do that.
Are you actually allowed to say something like that?
Well, you sort of. The sister that was older than me in religion, who had just been professed, she was sort of all very, sort of great respect, and she wouldn't question the authority. But we were allowed to, in certain circumstances, to question the authority. Mm. And I said, it's just a language I'm learning it for the grammar. And if she hadn't have reacted that way, I wouldn't have questioned anything anymore.
Sure.
But the way she questioned it, I sort of thought, well, don't Christians believe that there is only one God? And they do, to their extent, and to the field that they're thinking. And then I thought, okay, what about this Muhammad guy? I mean, he's supposed to be a prophet, but then the prophet should have ended just before Jesus. So I have to find out about him. Because my medical checkups were still in London at the time, I had to go down and stay with one of the other monastery's houses that used to be in Golders Green. And so I thought, okay, if I get out early from my hospital appointment, I could go to the Edgware Road and I could go and see if there are any Arabic things I could pick up for me and Sister Josephine. Okay, and I'll see if they've got like a Quran in English or something. So after I'd finished, I went down to the Edgware Road. I should have gone straight back to the monastery, by the way. And I picked up a few newspapers and things, and then I was in one shop and the man said, oh, you read in Arabic? And I said, yeah. So he spoke to me in Arabic and I spoke back. And he said, oh, that's great, have them. I said, oh, thanks, but you don't happen to have like a Quran in English or something? He said, yeah, take it. And he gave me a Quran in English, and it was so small I could fit it under my habit and sort of sneak it into the monastery. So, but they didn't have any in our monastery library. They had 2 books on Islam. One was a very childlike book saying, know your Muslim neighbour, and the other one was, I think, on Sufism. Mm. Nothing about
So what happened
itself.
with this smuggled Quran?
It got hidden in my cell, which was my bedroom. The nuns refer to the bedrooms as cells.
Really?
Yeah, it's supposed to go back to because our order was like from the Middle East. The ancient rule, we had little sort of hermitages on Mount Carmel, and the little hermitages were called cells.
Right.
So that's where it came from.
Okay. So when you opened up this book and started to read, what happened next?
It was sort of, I'd start reading it, and then things sort of, okay, so it says that in Christianity. I'd start thinking, that says that in Christianity. This says that in Judaism, but it's saying this in Islam. Actually, this is making more sense. And as the further I read on, sort of things sort of stood out, and the science of it stood out. The thing, it's been pointed out in other books, like things like clouds, mountain formations, embryology, things like that. And it's sort of, okay, this is something. Could you discuss this with anybody, or was this something that you... Oh no, I didn't definitely not discuss it with anybody. Not even to your colleague who you were studying Arabic with? Right? No, because she saw, and she still is, she's very sort of Christian in her outlook and in her life. So I didn't... It was okay for me to be having some sort of questions or doubts in my faith, but I wouldn't want to inflict it upon... Anybody else? Somebody else. Sure. Because that could, I always felt that could knock somebody's faith in God. Sure. Yeah. Sure. So this comparative study, if you like, was taking place, i.e. you were coming across, you had some idea of Judaism, of course you were quite fluent in Christian theology, and now you were coming across Islamic theology and seeing that no doubt many commonalities, however some differences, and for the most part a lot of the differences made more sense than what you maybe adhered to before. Yeah. So then what happened? It was coming across the verse in Surah Ma'idah, that there are priests and monks amongst you, and they recognise the truth. I think it's Surah Ma'idah 85 or 87, I'm not sure. And it was that verse that actually sort of, okay, then I put down the Quran, and I didn't go back to it actually after that. And I was thinking, and then at that point, I was doing canon law, so it meant that I was representing other sort of people, especially religious sisters, if they wanted to leave, or if they wanted to change house, for instance. There were certain things to go through and procedures. And I was also looking into early Christianity, a degree level study. Okay. Everything that we studied, it was to quite a high level, but we could never get recognition from it, because nuns are supposed to be humble and self-effacing. Right. Yeah, sorry. We've just got 5 minutes left, and unfortunately, we haven't covered all of the stuff that we want to. But just tell me very quickly. Of course, unfortunately, I'm having to rush you a bit here. First, what was the straw that broke the camel's back? In other words, what caused you to leave the order? And then, second, how did you go about finding out more about Islam and becoming a Muslim? Yeah. At the time, my health had deteriorated quite significantly. And also, for myself, I wasn't able to participate fully in the day-to-day activities of the religious life. So I used that as an excuse to leave the order. There wasn't any one thing, but it was more to do with me deciding, right, I've got to go and find out about Islam, and then I can become a Muslim. Really? Yeah. You'd made that decision? Yeah. So in my heart, Christianity, that had stopped. So I'd left the order, and it was over a period of 18 months that I found out about things. It was such a lengthy thing because my father died during that time, and I also had to sort out the financial arrangements for my mother and the rest of the family, make sure everything was okay, and then I could go ahead and set up. And then I'd started a college course, and I met a few Muslims on that college course. And I asked one of the girls sort of about Islam, and she and her brothers were into Sufism as their spirituality. So that's how I sort of found parts of Islam. And then I'd become very ill. I was in hospital, and so ill that you know, it was whether I'd live or die or whatever. But then once I'd sort of made my mind up, when I'd been discharged, I phoned my friend. I said, now I want to make Shahada. Forget sort of teaching me any more about Islam. So she and her brothers had picked me up, and we went to her house, and all our friends, mutual friends, were there, and so then I made Shahada.
Alhamdulillah. And this was how long ago?
This was nearly 7 years ago now.
7 years ago,
yeah.
Alhamdulillah. And how did you, because as you mentioned they were of Sufi persuasion, how did you find the Ahlul Bayt?
I've only sort of found that recently, within the last 18 months or so. I knew of Shiism, Sunnis, and other minor sects. I wasn't interested in placing myself in one camp or the other camp. So maybe for the first 5 years, I did a lot of studying with tafsir and you know, Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. But the funny thing was, and I had a lot of Sunni friends, and they really sort of, there were certain personalities in Sunni Islam that are quite prominent, but I was not attracted to. Whereas there are other figures that I were attracted to, but that lent more towards Shia Islam.
Well, what was the attraction in the first place?
Because they were, what, towards Shia Islam?
No, sorry, the personalities that you, is this from what, from historical readings or?
Yeah, it was later on that historical readings that I'd sort of become okay, and also using logic and reading more widely and more academic papers.
Sure. And the reaction of your Sunni friends was?
It's sort of a hot potato, isn't it, if you say you're Shia or you lean more towards Shiism. It's that, oh, what are you doing being Shia? You know, they curse this person, they curse that person, they do this, they do that. They're this sort of people, they're that sort of people. And I'm like, I've never heard anybody cursing anybody else in any aspect. And the things you refer to are actually, you know, like for instance, they're so, you shouldn't have bid'ah, no bid'ah at all. But yet, a lot of their historical figures have sort of based parts of Islam on bid'ah, on innovations and things. And it was reading a very good book by a non-Muslim, Wilfrid Mandelberg.
Yes. Successor to the
Succession
Prophet.
to
Yes,
the Prophet.
Beautiful book, yeah.
Yeah, and that was, it wasn't on one side or the other, but the only conclusion I could come to then was okay, Sunni Islam is Sunni Islam, but Shia Islam is mine. So I'm a Muslim and a mu'minah.
Inshallah, alhamdulillah, congratulations. And just finally, once you made that decision from all of the reading and all of the studies that you went through, and of course the book you mentioned is quite an academic, well, he's a professor in his own right, and his approach was very academic when he wrote that book. But once you made that decision, I mean, how did you go about it? Because if you like, circle of influence, your circle of friends were predominantly Sunni, and by the sounds of it, some of them were anti-Shi'i. You know, how did you then go and take the step? Was it something you did alone? Did you go out and find a community?
Going back to once I'd reverted and I moved out of the family home, I didn't know how to pray. I wasn't taught that. And it was a good friend of mine who taught me how to pray. But he prayed as a Shia Muslim. but I didn't know the difference between
Sure.
Sunni or Shia, ways of prayer. So, and I've always prayed as a Shia. So, and that only sort of came to me about 3 years ago. Okay, fine, it's just prayer. And I was doing it that way. And now, with the help of my friend as well, I've been able to sort of widen my circle of Shia friends by going. This year I was really happy to be involved in the Majlis near to where I lived in Bolton, and also have more Shia connections. So between Bolton and Liverpool, I've got more Shia friends and contacts. Although I'm still in contact with my Sunni friends, because
Sure.
I'm not going to sort of stop contact like that with them
Sure.
or at any time, because first of all, they did do a lot for me during my formative years, but also they're good friends now. And they're Muslims too.
Of course.
So there's no need for any breakup or breaking. But if anybody sort of says, you're doing this and you shouldn't be doing that, and if I know correctly, I'll tell them, no, this is the way because, and ABC.
Brilliant. Sister Amina Khan, it's been a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you very much for sharing your story. From becoming almost at the cusp of becoming a nun to becoming a Muslim and a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. I'm sure you all will share me in thanking Sister Amina for that. Thank you very much for joining us. And please remember, if you know of anybody who would be interested in sharing their story of how they came to Islam, then please email us at reborn@ahlulbayt.tv. Once again, thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.